Hello, everyone. This is Eric Perez from Talking Leadership, welcoming you back to the podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of being joined by a emerging leader, and funnily enough, this will be the start of the Emerging Leaders podcast series under the overall podcast. So thanks, everyone, for joining me. So the guest that I have today, just to give you a bit of her background, she's currently studying a Bachelor of Agriculture Sciences at the University of Queensland Gatton campus. She has been a research assistant at the Victoria University of Wellington as a summer position. She's currently the UQ ambassador under the Faculty of Science at the University of Queensland. And to top things off, at a full-time study load, she's also a tutor in the School of Agriculture and Food Sciences. So without further ado, I'd like to present Rebekah Ash. How are you going, Rebekah?
I'm well, thank you. How are you going, Eric?
I'm fantastic, mate. Look, thank you for joining me on what is the inaugural Emerging Leaders podcast. So I'd like to start with the first question, obviously, where you start. So this thing of leadership, why lead? So why have you taken on what appears to be leadership roles in your background there?
Right. So from a young age, I've always been pretty involved in leadership. I guess I've always had a passion for communication and working with people. Trying to create positive change has always been something that I've been interested in. And then in the industry that I'm in now, in the agricultural science area, I think there's so much ahead of the industry and it's a time of change. So I have an absolute passion for the industry. I think I'm so incredibly fortunate to be a young person that's entered into something that they don't see as hard work or hard study, but something that I really would like to work towards. I think taking on a leadership role is all about inspiring people around me and taking hold of various things that I see are critical to the future in the agricultural industry, for example, is food security, nutrition, how we're going to feed everyone sustainably. I think these are some of the biggest issues that we face in the future, and I just couldn't be more happy, I guess, to be involved in that and shaping that.
So that's it's interesting you bring up this thing about the challenge. You don't see that there's a challenge in the industry that you're going into, but lots of opportunity. From your experience in the ag sector as it stands, is there a set of critical leader capabilities or skills that you look for in the leaders that you work with at this stage, Rebekah?
Yeah, I think for me, there's a lot of talk right now around food. And I think a critical leader capability is being able to understand that people have various opinions, and those various opinions are based off their upbringing, their life experiences, and it's to accept those differences and embrace them and sort of use those to your advantage to build upon them. And then just being able to relate to the people around you and just be human and communicate, I think, are some of the most critical leader capabilities.
Okay, thank you for sharing that, because in the podcast I've done to date, this thing about communication has been a very big issue, and it's been brought up in various different ways in the leaders that I've been speaking to. Do you think emerging leaders can sniff out people that are not genuinely trying to communicate, that it's not genuine interaction with the people that they're working with? Is that a radar that you've got finely tuned or not yet?
I think it's a little bit hit and miss. I mean, you always have your instinct feelings when you are speaking to someone about the communication and whether they're genuinely interested and motivated in, I guess, whatever aspect you're in. But I think it's important not to jump ship and make judgments straight away and sort of investigate it a little bit more, because you never really know.
That's a very considered answer. So you've answered one of my next questions about what are your views on some key leader capabilities. So one of them being communication. What do you have any thoughts on emotional intelligence? The in the leaders that you've dealt with? So being able to see empathy and other traits in the leaders that you're working with, and do you put any value in that in your leaders?
Yes, definitely. I think emotional intelligence is so critical for leaders, particularly something like empathy, and being able to relate to those that they're surrounded by. Because without that empathy, those people aren't going to be able to find a channel to, I guess, connect with their leaders. And without that connection, it's more difficult to create that positive change that I was speaking about prior.
Yeah, okay. And that, just for the information to the listeners, so you talk about change is a very big thing for you, and change, being able to see that in the leaders that you work with. Is that something that that permeates what you want to do as a leader and as someone, a professional into the future? Do you want to get involved with change type projects or agriculture in the third or developing world? Is that something that you're interested in?
Yes, so I'd say my biggest passion lies in international development in agriculture. And
Okay.
I think, in my generation, we've grown up with change. If you think about it, when I was born, there was no such thing as a smartphone. But so rapidly that's changed. And we've grown up with change and we're used to that, so we embrace it. So yeah, definitely. I think accepting change, embracing change, creating change. We know that things need to be done and there's no point in pushing them away. It's about fueling them.
So you just added one to the list of leader capabilities, and acceptance and use of change. What are your views on the following capabilities? Foresight. Do you see that as important in the leaders that you've come across, or even for yourself?
Yes, I think, leadership isn't about jumping on the bandwagon of what everyone's already talking about and creating, a role for yourself in that. It's about that foresight and looking into the future and leading a movement that's yet to come, that people are more hesitant. That's when leaders are really needed, is in those foresight, whether it's issues, challenges, or even opportunities. That's such a critical capability.
Okay, and finally, and this one will round this off, and why I asked this is that these have come up and I've brought these up, sorry, in previous podcasts. So the last one here is strategic thinking. Is that an area of leadership that you feel is important, not sure, or have you seen it being applied in a work setting from leaders that you've dealt with? And not, I don't just mean in the business world, like leaders at university or leaders out in the world when you've done your ambassador work for the university.
Mm-hmm. So I think strategic thinking is always going to be important in any area. I think in terms of leadership, strategic thinking is important in thinking about how you reach people. Say, for example, social media now is such an important thing. So if you want to be strategic about how you're going to lead, it's not necessarily by the traditional forms of leadership. There's other ways that people need to be thinking about how to communicate.
Sure. Okay. And that wraps it up nicely. The comms element to the this thing we call leader capability. So the next area, Rebekah, if I can, is asking around emerging versus established leaders. So the questions I have here, the first one is, what do emerging leaders bring to the table that established leaders don't?
I think fresh passion and optimism is a big one. So I think this is how I like to think of it. Established leaders, they're often optimistic. They think of the glass as half full rather than half empty. Emerging leaders, where the glass overfilling, there's no consideration of it being half empty. I think that's definitely something different. And then I guess on top of that, we serve as a platform for people who are more hesitant to consult and come up to, because simply we're less established and less intimidating in some cases.
Is that, just to unpack that a little more, and please shoot me down if I get this wrong, more of a capacity to risk take when you're an emerging leader than not? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we take many calculated risks.
Oh, okay. All right. Very good. And the second question is, has the industry you work in, so agriculture, shaped your view of leadership?
Definitely. I definitely think the biggest thing for me has been in terms of leadership is accepting differences and building upon them. I mean, personally, I'm very interested in bridging the gap between the rural urban divide, right? So being in the agricultural industry, there's this complete disconnect, and you just have to understand that there are differences in the way that people think about things, about people's ambitions in rural Australia and urban Australia. So for me, in the industry, it's in the agriculture industry, that's been a big part of my leadership development, has been learning how to look at how to accept differences, but actually use them to your advantage rather than see it as an issue.
Yeah, okay. I could talk about that forever, but we'll move on. I want to ask you about leader development now. In your journey with this thing called leadership, what professional development have do you think has made a difference in your career to this point? So, is there something you've done in your travels with the university or off your own bat that has made a difference in terms of how you're developing as a leader?
Yeah, for me, I guess I could say I'm very much an experiential learner. So for me, leadership development has mostly come in the form of conferences that I've been to and workshops that have occurred alongside those conferences. I think being surrounded by other inspired youth has really ignited my leadership and also my leadership development. And then as well as that, various volunteering opportunities I've taken up or travels has definitely made a difference in my career.
So that segues nicely into the next question is, do you have a view of lifelong learning if that's how you're learning at this stage? Do you envisage yourself doing more learning into the future, or will there be an end point where it's studies are done now to get in and do the hard work of whichever career path you end up taking?
I mean, it's a bit cliche, but they say you learn something new every day. And as I was saying before, we're living in a world of constant change. I mean, lifelong learning and embracing that is so important for further development. Living in a world of constant change, there's always that room for learning.
Okay, and again, another segue into the next. So these next questions are around leadership models, and the first one I'll ask is, have you had a mentor? Yes or no? And if yes, why? If no, why not?
Okay, so I wouldn't say that I've had a specific mentor. I've definitely had certain strong sort of leading figures, but no specific mentor. And I think that's because I'm still finding out and exploring exactly what sector in the ag industry I'll lead into. I mean, I'm very interested in international development and research, but exactly what field, I'm not entirely sure. And as well, I mean, I'm only second year, I'm still very early on, so I'm constantly meeting people and I guess not trying to force a mentorship, but just waiting until, and I guess also seeking the right person and everything.
So it's still early days. Yeah, that's fine. That would make sense given that your early career in terms of your studies and stuff. So can I ask what individuals have, without naming them, of course, what individuals have you drawn help to develop your leadership approach, style, thinking? So is there someone in your in your family life, and that's what I mean by personal life, in your family life or academic life or some other setting that has helped you drawn some skills around this thing called leadership?
Yeah, I think an interesting one, completely unrelated to agriculture, is actually an endurance runner. And they have really inspired me with their leadership and their way of being very real and connecting to everyone and talking about both the success, the challenges in their career, how they've worked upon them. And I guess being an endurance runner, she's really got to have that mental strength. So that's definitely been someone that I've looked up to in the past few years. I'm also very fortunate to say that my dad's been a very big leader for me in my life and a strong leading figure in the agricultural industry as well, actually. And seeing what he's done has really inspired me as well.
Is there such a thing as a perfect leader in your travels?
Personally, I don't think there's any such thing as a perfect leader. Every single person in this world has different requirements in their life. They have different opinions, and one leader can never sort of satisfy every aspect of life and career for an individual. But again, it's best to accept that and use those differences to an advantage for leaders to learn from others and learn from those around them, because I think listening and being open is so important.
That's a fantastic response. I couldn't come up with that response. So there you go. All this risk taking and stuff, and being able to jump in and just draw from, and that makes sense, really. That there is no such thing as a perfect leader, but there's always a template that people carry in their heads to what they think is the best kind of leader. Maybe perfect's not the right word. Rebekah, in your travels, what do you make of the following statement? Leaders are born, not made.
I think there is definitely some truth to that statement. I mean, I think all leaders have this burning fire within them that's just constantly being ignited by various things. And sometimes, people ask why or how did you just get so passionate about this, and how do you have this constant fuel to keep going and do all these different things. And sometimes it's a little bit hard to explain, but it's just there. It's not work. It's just, I guess, this passion for empowering others that you're around. And yeah, I guess it's just something that's hard to explain. So you could definitely say in some cases, leaders are born, not made.
Thank you, Rebekah. So that ends the podcast. I'd like to thank you for your time.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
Cheers, mate.